Hello, my amazing students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And tonight in our blue book, we're doing lesson 89, algebraic phrases. And when we're talking about algebraic phrases, we're talking about putting into algebraic expressions the words that we want to say in our problem. So we have some phrases that we're going to learn to express algebraically. Sum means to add. Greater than and increased by means that we're going to add something to it. So here are some examples. The sum of a number and 7. So sum means to add. So we're going to have the sum of a number. Since we don't know what it is, we'll call it n. And 7. So notice that when I'm using my expression and I'm turning it into an algebraic phrase, I put the sign, the sum sign, which is add, in the place of the word and. Okay, so the sum of, and now they're going to give me two quantities, a number and 7, and in between the two quantities, a number and 7, I will put the plus sign. So that is how we would algebraically express this word phrase. The sum of a number and -7. Well, that's just another way of subtracting, but we're going to write it as a sum. The sum means plus of a number, and then the and is where the plus sign will go, -7. So this would be a sum of a number and -7, which we know that we can simplify to n minus 7. Okay, so in a little bit we'll talk about difference. We could also write this as the difference of a number and 7. So we'll do that one in a minute. So now, on our next board, we have this little bit bigger board. Let me see if I can get it in there. Okay, so 7 greater than a number. So 7 greater than a number, you're going to see that anytime you have a greater than or a less than, it's going to be on the end. So 7 greater than means 7 added to a number. So we would write that as n plus 7. Okay, and then a number increased by 7 is going to be a number. We start with the number and then we increase it by 7, which means we're adding 7 to it. So these are all words that you need to become familiar with so that you will consistently choose the correct algebraic phrase for it. So now we're talking about less than or decreased by. So now we're talking about subtraction. And the key word for subtraction is difference. Okay, so we're going to talk about some phrases that mean subtraction. 7 less than a number. Now, remember what I said when I said 7 greater than a number. The greater than was on the end. The same thing is true here. 7 less than a number means that I start with the number and then I take 7 less than that, and the algebraic phrase is n minus 7. Okay, so working a little bit more on things that mean subtraction. A number decreased by 7 means we start with the number and then we decrease it by 7 or take 7 away. A product means to multiply. The product of a number and 7 means that we're going to take the number and then we're going to multiply it by 7. Now remember that little dot we can use for multiply, or we could use the times sign, or we could use n times 7. Okay, but we can always simplify it to 7n. Okay, a fast way to write multiplication is put the coefficient in the front and the variable in the back. Very handy. Okay, then you can do without the parentheses. So now, as we're talking about expressions, if we wanted to use n, we know n stands for an unknown number. Well, the opposite of n, or negative n, would stand for the opposite of an unknown number. So we can use n and negative n to mean the unknown number and its opposite. So let's play with that for a little bit. So here on this board, we have twice a number, which means 2 times the number. So I don't really need the parentheses because it's a variable, or just 2 times the number. Anytime I have either 2 variables or a coefficient and a variable up close to each other, touching, that means multiplication, doesn't it? So now what about this one? 9 times the opposite of a number. Well, we just talked about the opposite of a number was the opposite of n, or negative n. So what if I said 9 times negative n? Okay, and that would be 9 times the opposite of a number. But could I write that a little bit easier? Okay, what is it when I have a positive 9 times a negative number? Positive times negative is going to be a negative. So could I say that this is a negative 9n, or the opposite of 9n? I could simplify it just like that. Okay, so here we have some more problems. We're just going to keep on practicing. The sum of twice a number and negative 8. Okay, so the sum of means I'm going to add 2 things together. And remember, the and is where that plus sign will go. So then let's think of, what are the 2 numbers I'm adding together? Twice a number, which we could write as 2n, or 2 times n, and is where our plus sign will go, a negative 8. Now, let's see if we got it right. The sum of twice a number, so that's the first part, and that's where the plus sign goes, negative 8. Okay, so can you think of an easier way to write that? Since we have plus and minus, that's a little awkward. Could we just say twice n, or 2n minus 8? That would be even simpler, wouldn't it? So that would be our simplest algebraic expression. So now look at this one. Now notice that this one is inside this one. Okay, the sum of twice a number and 8. The sum of twice a number and 8. But now we have 5 times the sum. So we're going to write the same thing. We'll write it in this form first. So twice a number plus a negative 8. And then we're going to put a bracket and a bracket and a 5 times on the outside. 5 times the whole quantity of the sum of twice n and negative 8. So we could also write that as 5 times 2n minus 8. They're both the same thing. All right, so here on another board, more practice. Okay, the sum of a number and 9. Sum means to add a number, and is where the plus sign goes, 9. The sum of a number and 9. Okay, what about this one? A number decreased by 9. Decreased means to take away the 9. So a number decreased by 9. Aren't these pretty easy? The opposite of a number decreased by 6. So I want you to get this in your brain. Think about how you would write it. Write it on your own piece of paper and see if you can get it right. Okay, so the opposite of a number would be negative n, or the opposite of n. And then decreased by 6 would be minus 6 more. That's all there is to it. The sum of the opposite of a number and negative 3. The sum means we're going to add. Then we have two quantities. Here's where the addition sign goes. So on the right, we just have negative 3. And on the left, we have the opposite of a number, which would be negative n. Okay, so the sum of the opposite of a number and negative 3. So now let's write that as simply as we can. So it would just be negative n minus 3. That's all we have to do. Okay, so let's get our other board. The product of 5 times a number and 6. Now, product means to multiply. So, the product means we're going to multiply 5 times a number, which is 5n. We're going to multiply that by 6. Now, we could use the times sign. We could use a little dot in between them, or we can put them in parentheses. But we could make this simpler by multiplying 5 times n times 6 together, and we could get 30n. And we'll work on that some more later. The sum of twice a number and negative 3. Sum means to add. We're going to put the addition right there. Twice a number is 2n and a negative 3. So couldn't we write this as 2n minus 3? And that would be our final simplified answer. So we have a few more. Okay, so now these are getting a little bit more complicated, but that means they're getting to be a little bit more fun. 4 times the sum of twice a number and negative 3. Remember, the sum is the plus, and it goes where we see the and. So 4 times means 4 times what's coming after that. The sum of twice a number, which is 2n, and a negative 3. Okay, so to simplify, we could write, instead of 2n plus a negative 3, we can just take off the negative and make this a minus. So 4 times the quantity 2n minus 3. And then down here, the product of negative 2 and a number increased by 5. The product, and there's the and. The and is where we put the times sign. The product of what and what? Negative 2 times a number increased by 5. Negative 2 times n plus 5. And we'll work on simplifying those a little bit more later, but right now we're just writing our algebraic expressions. Now it's time for your practice. So I want you to copy the first 3 phrases down, and then I want you to pause your video and work on them by yourself, because unless you wrestle with these yourself, you're going to have a difficult time learning them. It's very often easy to see somebody else do something, but it's a little bit tougher when you do it yourself. So that's why I want you to practice and try to do your practice without looking at your video, and then look at your video to check it. All right, so pause your video. So hopefully you did that and you're back and you've already done these 3 problems. So the sum of a number and negative 4. Sum means add. A number will just be the n and then the -4. The and is where the plus sign goes. The sum of a number and -4. So now, to simplify, we could just say n minus 4. Okay? A number reduced by 4. Remember, reduced by is a subtraction. So a number reduced by 4. And then lastly, the sum of the opposite of a number and -3. So sum means to add. The and is where the add goes. Okay? So the opposite of a number would be -n, and then a -3. So now we're just going to say, to simplify, -n minus 3 is the same as the sum of a -3. We have 3 more practices, then we will be done with this lesson. Okay, well, we're getting here. These are the next 2 practices. I couldn't fit the last one on my board, so we'll have to save the last one for one more board. But, again, this is a practice for you. So I want you to copy it down. And then I want you to pause your video and think about them and write your expression. And then come back and check your answer. Okay, so pause your video. All right, so here we have the product of the opposite of a number and 6. So notice there's only one and. There it is. And that's where the times sign is going to go. So times, or a little dot, or 2 parentheses. Okay, the product of the opposite of a number, which is -n, times 6. Okay, so the product of the opposite of a number and 6. So that is correct, but it is not the simplest way to write it. Anytime we're multiplying 2 numbers together, we could put this in the front and we could put this in the back. We could say 6 times a -n. Okay, or we can remember that a positive times a negative gives us a negative, and we get a -6n. And we'll work on simplifying these later, but right now we need this or this as our answer. Okay, so 5 times the sum of a number and -6. See where the and is? So that's going to be where the sum goes. All right, so the sum is plus. So we're going to have 5 times. We'll put our big bracket. And then the sum of a number and -6. Okay, and put another bracket. So 5 times n minus 6 would be even better, right? 5 times n minus 6. So now we have one more problem to be done. Here we go, the last one. The product of -4 and a number increased by 6. So here we have the and here, and then after all of that, we have increased by 6. So we have 2 things going on in this one. So pause your video and go do it by yourself, and then come back and check it. All right, so hopefully you did that. We got the product is times of -4, and is where we're going to put the times a number. Then all of this is increased by 6. Okay, so I put this in a parenthesis because I will make this look prettier. Okay, the product of a -4 and a number increased by 6. So this, since we have a -4 and an n, could be -4n plus 6. And we are done with lesson 89. We're moving on to lesson 90, another big 10 lesson, a multiple of 10. This is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.